2013 was a huge turning point for my channel, as I started reviewing various TV shows and movies left and right, and it seemed like I had enough steam to review over 100 movies or TV shows if I wanted to. Unfortunately, that didn't really happen at the time, as I took a long break from reviewing movies and TV shows just so I could broaden my channel from just doing reviews to actually doing discussions about the movie and TV industry. Rugrats was among those reviews that I did way back in 2013, and it was actually one of my first reviews where I attempted to expand more on my thoughts about a TV series, though it only clocked in for over 8 minutes. At first, I was a bit hesitant about revisiting this series again, because I felt that I've said my piece about the series when I did my review of the show way back in 2013. But now that I got more ground to cover in various movies and TV shows I've watched, including the TV shows and movies I've reviewed in the past, this would allow me to rediscover some things from Rugrats that I didn't cover in my original review. The original review, that also contains screenshots from the show itself, is still up on my channel if you want to check it out. Let's see if this revisited review of Rugrats would beat the number of likes and views I got in my original review of the series. Caution. The following video is an in-depth review of the TV series I'm currently reviewing, which means that there will be massive spoilers in the review. If you haven't seen this TV series yet, then please feel free to watch this TV series first before watching this video. However, if you have already seen this TV series, or you just want to know my thoughts on this TV series, then keep watching. Rugrats was a phenomenon when it aired on Nickelodeon in 1991. It aired alongside two other Nicktoons, which were Doug and Ren and Stimpy. And the first three Nicktoons set the stage for the Nicktoons franchise that would continue running to this very day. But even though both Doug and Ren and Stimpy were very popular Nicktoons during their runs, they never quite reached the level of popularity that Rugrats would eventually eclipse in the 1990s. Rugrats was a unique show in that it was one of the few shows at the time that actually takes the premise about looking at the world through a baby's point of view and actually explores that notion. But before I go into this even further, I would like to give out a brief summary on the show, which is basically taken from my original review, since I think that the summary I gave out in the original review really explains what the show is all about very well. The show is about the adventures of the four main babies, who are Tommy Pickles, the leader of the group, Chucky Finster, the one who is scared of everything, and the twins Phil and Lil DeVille. Many of the episodes will focus on the four main babies going on various adventures that will either take place in their backyard or inside their houses as they let their imaginations run wild. Some other members of the group are Angelica Pickles, who is Tommy's older cousin and is often seen bullying the babies, and Susie Carmichael, who is the same age as Angelica but is much kinder towards the babies. Later during the show's run, two new characters were added to the cast, which were Dill Pickles, who is Tommy's new baby brother, and Kimmy Finster, who is Chucky's new stepsister. Even though I had a lot of favorite Nicktoons during the 1990s, Hey Arnold and the Angry Beavers in particular, Rugrats usually held a special place in my heart because it was one of the first Nicktoons that I was exposed to when I was little. As I mentioned before, Rugrats was a very unique show at the time that it first aired because it was a show about babies viewing the world in either an exciting or terrifying way, and the show did a really good job of portraying those aspects of the world from a baby's point of view. Another aspect that made Rugrats such a unique show was that the protagonists were actually babies rather than school-aged children or older. Prior to Rugrats, most of the shows that were geared towards children would have had child protagonists who are old enough to be in school or old enough to be in middle school. Rugrats, however, was a unique case where the main protagonists were babies. I'm pretty sure that the viewers who were watching the show at the time were scratching their heads and wondering how a show could be able to look at the world from a baby's point of view, especially when most babies are at that stage where their minds wouldn't be fully developed enough to take in the world around them. Well, Rugrats was somehow able to make that work by having the babies themselves use their imaginations to envision how they see the world for what it is. This not only made the babies more relatable to the audience, but it also accurately portrays how some young children would sometimes use their imaginations to see how the world is. Whenever young children use their imaginations, they tend to look at the world in a more fantastical way, which can produce both exciting and scary perceptions of the world at large, depending on how big their imaginations are. Adults, meanwhile, have a more realistic perception of the world as they see the world for what it is, and we get to see that with the babies' parents as we see them go on with their normal lives, while the babies are having imaginary adventures in their own backyard. In regards to the babies using their imaginations in each episode, I loved how the atmosphere of the earlier seasons had a more surreal and dreamlike feel, as it made the episodes even more interesting to watch. Even though we know that the adventures that the babies go on are just a part of their imaginations, and they are mostly going on these adventures in their backyards or in their playpens, it feels like we are actually inside the babies' imaginations and we are exploring the world through their eyes. Whenever the babies get into scary situations in their imaginations, such as the Dreamland episode where Chucky has a nightmare about Tommy turning into a bizarre creature and yelling out, "I'm not Tommy!" we actually get scared along with Chucky because of how that sequence just came out of nowhere, even though it was revealed to be a dream. The show makes good use of blurring the lines between reality and fantasy whenever the babies are using their imaginations, as it makes the show much more bizarre as they'll just throw dream sequences at you without any kind of warning. This always made the narrative much more interesting because it turns the expectations that we have for a particular scene on its head once they take a nosedive into the dream elements of that scene. Another aspect that I really enjoyed about the show was how the babies' imaginations tend to get so out of hand that they often misinterpret everything they see, mostly because Angelica fills their heads with scary scenarios for the situations they get involved in. This really shows that despite the fact that the babies try to explore the world around them, they are still too young to understand what the world is really like and are often prone to overreact to the smallest details in the situations that they are in and cause them trouble for themselves and sometimes for their parents. This is a good way to help explain to kids in the audience about learning to separate reality from fantasy and that they should study the world around them first before diving in headfirst into a situation that they are not well informed about. I also like the fact that the babies often mispronounce certain words, such as saying things like eggy explorers, which actually means explorers, because not only is it cute hearing them mispronounce these words, but it's a pretty good representation of how young children actually mispronounce certain words themselves. It actually reminded me of all those times when I was little that I often mispronounced certain words, especially my R's. Now let's talk about what made the meat of the series, and that were the characters themselves. The four main babies, Tommy, Chucky, Phil, and Lil, were very interesting characters as each episode is spent on the four of them going on various adventures and exploring the world at large, no matter how young they are. What I really enjoyed about these four characters were the relationships shared between them, as the show does a good job of showing how close they are to each other, and that no matter how scary the situation gets, even if it's in their imaginations for the most part, they will still remain together through thick and thin. Another aspect that I really enjoy about all the characters in the series, and it was something that I didn't quite pick up on the first time around, was that each baby seems to represent a different emotion that a child would experience whenever they are trying to understand the world they are living in. Tommy Pickles is shown as the leader of the group, and he often doesn't show any fear in the adventures that he and his friends go on, no matter how scary the situations would get. Tommy represents the kids who are curious about the world and are willing to dive into headfirst into a situation they are not familiar with because they want to learn more about the world around them. Chucky Finster is Tommy's best friend and is the scaredy cat of the group, since he normally doesn't want to go on any of the adventures that his friends want to go on. But despite that, there are times when he tries to conquer his fears to help out his friends whenever they are in trouble. Chucky is also the voice of reason for the group, since his cautious nature does help the other babies realize when they are in too deep into a situation, although that hasn't quite stopped the other babies from going on these adventures anyway. Chucky represents the kids who are scared of what kind of dangers the world can bring, since they don't understand about what the world's really like. They also tend to be more cautious about approaching a situation that they don't understand, rather than dive into headfirst into a situation. Other than Chucky, Phil and Lil were probably the most interesting characters to me because they are always seen together and also share similar likes with each other, as they both like to eat bugs, which is both disgusting and hilarious. They are also the most relatable characters to me because they are twins, and their relationship reminds me of my relationship with my twin sister, except me and my sister never ate bugs, as we are just as close as Phil and Lil are to each other. Phil and Lil represent the kids who are in the middle ground and don't really care about the dangers of the world. They just like to tag along with whatever activities their friends get into. Now that I've talked a bit about the four main babies, I would like to talk about the other characters in the series. The other main characters of the series tend to be a supporting cast of sorts to the four main babies, and I also found their relationships with the main four to be very interesting too. Angelica Pickles is Tommy and Dale's older cousin, and is one of the oldest characters of the baby cast. Unfortunately, Angelica is also the main bully of the series, as she spends most of her time scaring the babies by twisting their perceptions of how they see the world and turning them into something terrifying. For example, in one episode when Chucky gets a new bed and he was afraid of sleeping in it because he was not used to sleeping in a bed, Angelica comes up with a story about a monster living under his bed and that it would eat Chucky up if he so much as looks under his bed. Despite that, she's actually quite a complex character because even though she is the bully of the show, she doesn't really get away with her bullying. Whenever she takes a bullying a bit too far, she's often punished for her actions, whether it be through karma or her parents will actually wise up to her schemes. So, isn't it kind of weird to say that Angelica Pickles is actually my most favorite character in the entire series, despite the fact that she, bullies the other babies? I usually don't care for characters to bully other characters since I'm against bullying, but Angelica always strikes me as an interesting character because she isn't really that unlikable as a character. She actually has moments where she's just as upset or scared as the other babies, and it made me feel for her character at times. Susie Carmichael is another character who is much older than the 4 main babies and is around the same age as Angelica. She also serves as a polar opposite to Angelica, as while Angelica bullies the other babies and tries to scare them a few times, Susie is shown as being more nurturing towards the babies, and she usually tries her best to help the babies understand the world better while protecting them from Angelica's bullying. Both Susie and Angelica represent the older kids who either bully their younger siblings or cousins to make themselves feel more superior, Angelica, or the older kids who act as mentors for the younger kids and try to help them understand the world a bit better, Susie. Now let's talk about the 2 most controversial characters that were added in this series later on, Dale and Kimmy. There's actually not a lot to say about Dale Pickles, Tommy's new little brother, as he just spends most of the series being the butt of poop jokes, which was an issue that I took with the show in later seasons, but I'll explain about that later. However, I will say that Dale represents the younger sibling that an older sibling will occasionally take care of and is essential to helping that older sibling learn more about the importance of responsibility. Kimmy Pfister is Chucky's new stepsister, and she is so usually getting along with Chucky, which is something I found to be very refreshing since it's rare that you see TV shows show step families in a positive light. Thanks, Cinderella, for making people think that having step families is a negative thing. Also, as some fans have pointed out, Kimmy does seem like a female version of Tommy, as she is also brave whenever they go on their adventures. Kimmy represents the kids who have to deal with either being in a new environment or in a new family, and has to learn to adjust to these changes. Okay, so now that I finally did my long assessment on each of the baby characters, let's talk about the adults of the show. The parents in the show were very interesting, as it was stated that they are actually new parents, meaning that this series explores how each parent are trying to do their best in taking care of their children while learning how to be better parents. All of the parents in the show seem to be unaware of the adventures that their kids go on, since they are either too busy to attend to their kids, Drew and Charlotte, or are still trying to understand their kids by reading lots of child care books, Stu and Dee Dee. Despite their faults of being slightly inattentive to their kids' adventures, all the parents in the show truly do care for their children, and they will try to either discipline them if they step out of line, or comfort them whenever they get into situations that would terrify them. They also serve as that break into reality whenever the babies are using their imaginations to envision the way they see the world. Whenever the babies get into situations they don't understand, the adults are usually there to help them cope with the situation and explain to them about what is really happening in that situation, making the baby see the world for what it really is, a little at a time. Now, if there was a problem that I had with this series, it would start with the later seasons. The main thing that I had an issue with in the later seasons was that the show seemed to lose that surreal and dreamlike feel that the early episodes had. That was one of the main reasons why I liked the show in the first place, because it felt like we were inside the babies' imaginations due to the surreal feel of their environments. When they dropped that surreal quality into the show in the later seasons, it made the show seem so generic, and it was often hard for me to get back into the series at that point. Also, this is around the same time that Dale was introduced into the cast, and that was the point where I stopped watching the show altogether. I personally don't think that Dale and Kimmy were the problems with the later seasons per se, but it seemed like the moment that co-creator Paul Germain, who created the show along with Arlene Klasky and Gabor Csupo, left the show to work on Recess, the show sort of lost its humor and surreal quality that made it so good in the first place. It's also kind of hard to say where the show should have originally ended. Should it have ended in 1994 when the show was canceled the first time? Should it have ended after the first movie, the Rugrats movie? Or should it have ended after the All Growed Up special? To me, the show should have ended after the All Growed Up special because this would have been the perfect ending for the series. Seeing the Rugrats looking forward to growing up and therefore putting their adventures behind them as they want to see the world for what it is would have been a great way to end the series, with the Rugrats finally maturing as characters and looking forward to their futures. The original Rugrats series ran for 9 seasons with a total of 172 episodes, which at the time that it aired was the longest running Nicktoon, at least until SpongeBob SquarePants came along. Notice that I just said the original series. That's because the moment that I was writing this review, Nickelodeon had just announced that they are planning on making a 26-episode revival of the series and are making another Rugrats movie in 2020. I'm actually glad that I waited to make this review because I would have missed that announcement and I wouldn't be able to talk about it in my review. I will admit that I'm a bit curious to see what they are exactly going to do with the franchise moving forward. While I'm happy to see Rugrats finally come back to TV after all these years, I thought that they had a pretty good run originally, with over 9 seasons worth of episodes, 2 spin-offs under his name, and 3 movies beforehand. So what more can they do with the franchise at this point? I just hope that the 26 episode revival has the same surreal and dreamlike quality that the early seasons had, and even have some of that signature adult humor that the early episodes also had. As for the movie coming out in 2020, I'm not that thrilled about the movie being a live action CGI hybrid movie, because I would have preferred it to be a traditionally animated film that's faithful to the original series, just like the first 3 movies were. I am interested in seeing how both the 26 episode revival series and the movie would turn out, as I hope they do the series some justice. Overall, I'm giving Rugrats a thumbs up. This was a fantastic series that really explores the concept of imagination through a child's perspective, and how that imagination can sometimes influence how a child sees the world. I would highly recommend the series to anyone who also has a child who has an overactive imagination and wants to see a series that gives an interesting insight into the world from a child's point of view. Hope you enjoyed my review of Rugrats. Psst. Hey you. Have you been enjoying the Reviews 2.0 videos? Want to get an added bonus for viewing these videos? Like getting early access to these videos before they are released on YouTube? Or being able to request what movies and TV shows I should review next? Then please feel free to support these videos through my Patreon account. Check out all of the tier titles on my account and choose which tier title you want to be known as. You could become a new member on the block, an early bird, be a part of the future Bunch team, a backstage passenger, an animation superstar, and last but not least, the honorary supreme. So show off your tier title name to the world once you support the Reviews 2.0 videos through Patreon.